Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Books and Bytes. Today, we're going to be diving deep into Infidel, the autobiography of Ayaan Hirsi Ali. It's a intense and personal journey, and we've got a lot to unpack.
Infidel takes us chronologically through Ali's life, from her childhood in Somalia to her eventual escape to the Netherlands. It's a story woven with themes of cultural constraints, particularly for women, Ali's evolving relationship with Islam, and ultimately her pursuit of individual freedom in the face of both. It asks some tough questions about faith, identity, and the clash between tradition and modernity.
So she starts with her childhood. What was that like for her?
Imagine growing up as a nomad in Somalia, where knowing your clan lineage is like knowing your street address, crucial for navigating social life. That was Ali's reality. She paints this vivid picture of learning those intricate lineages, even reciting them with her brother, despite finding it a bit pointless as kids growing up in concrete houses.
That already hints at the tension between her upbringing and those deep-seated Somali traditions, right?
Exactly, and that tension becomes even more pronounced with her mother. Ali's grandmother is very much a figure representing the old ways, but her mother defies tradition by moving to Aden and embracing stricter Islamic practices.
Did that cause problems?
According to Ali's grandmother, absolutely. She believed this defiance brought misfortune upon the family. Their forced relocation to Mogadishu, a Hawe territory, was seen as proof of this. That deep-seated belief in clan lineage and the consequences of defying tradition really permeates Ali's early life.
Sounds like a lot of pressure. And then there's the added layer of Islam.
Yes, and Ali's relationship with Islam is a thread that runs throughout the entire book. It's complex and constantly evolving. In the beginning, there's confusion. She talks about watching her grandmother pray and being punished for interrupting, not really grasping the ritual's significance. It seems like religion, at least initially, was more about arbitrary rules than spiritual comfort for her.
Does she give specific examples of that?
One that sticks out is when soldiers raid their home in Mogadishu. Ali's grandmother fiercely defies them, yelling, "Sons of prostitutes, Allah will burn you in hell." Ali is terrified by the situation, but also struck by her grandmother's courage and strong will.
So even within this restrictive environment, there's a sense of rebellion.
Absolutely. And that spirit of defiance is something we see in Ali herself. She shares an anecdote about being thrown into a latrine by her brother. It's told with humor. But it sparks a conversation about the importance of honor in Somali culture and how even seemingly insignificant events are viewed through that lens.
And honor plays a significant role in the next traumatic event Ali describes.
Right. You're thinking of female genital mutilation. It's a harrowing account. Ali doesn't shy away from the physical and emotional pain she endured. What's particularly chilling is how she explains the justifications used to defend this practice, that uncircumcised girls would be possessed by devils, fall into vice, and become whores.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that such practices still exist.
It's a stark reminder of the oppressive nature of certain cultural and religious beliefs, especially towards women. But it also highlights the need to understand the context in which these beliefs exist.
So it's not about condoning the practice, but understanding the cultural forces at play.
Exactly. Ali's childhood is full of these contrasts, moments of hardship intertwined with glimpses of resilience, and even humor. Take, for example, her family's escape to the countryside. She vividly describes the terror she felt towards everything in the natural world, but also recounts with humor how her grandmother attempted to teach her the difference between rational and irrational fears.
It sounds like her grandmother had a huge impact on her life.
Undeniably. And then comes another big change. The family moves to Saudi Arabia.
How does she react to that?
Initially with hatred. She despises the strict enforcement of Islamic practices there. She feels like an outsider, subjected to harsh judgments and rigid rules. She even recounts being called a black slave girl by a particularly cruel teacher.
So Saudi Arabia represents a further constraint on her freedom.
Yes. But even there, Ali experiences moments of kindness. She talks about getting caught in a rainstorm and being helped by a kind Saudi man. It's a reminder that even within a culture that can feel oppressive, there are individuals who choose to act with compassion.
Does anything else stand out from her time in Saudi Arabia?
Ali's encounter with the Saudi legal system, she tells the story of Oba, a Somali woman accused of prostitution and facing severe punishment. This incident really exposes the harshness of Saudi law, especially towards women. Even Ali's father expresses disgust at the injustice of it all.
It sounds like this experience planted the seeds of doubt for Ali, a questioning of the absolute authority she'd been taught to accept.
You hit the nail on the head. And that questioning continues as she experiences more of the world. After a brief stay in Ethiopia, where she's exposed to people of different faiths for the first time, The family moves to Kenya.
Does that bring more freedom?
In some ways, yes, Kenya is more secular. And Ali revels in the newfound freedom of not having to wear a headscarf. But her mother remains deeply prejudiced against Kenyans, clinging tightly to her Somali identity and Islamic beliefs.
So that tension between tradition and modernity is still present within her own family.
Absolutely. And it's in Kenya that we see Ali navigate some universal teenage experiences, but within a very different cultural context. She talks about her first period and her complete lack of knowledge about menstruation because of cultural taboos. She also shares her feelings about arranged marriages, having witnessed her friends going through the process and contemplating her own future.
It's a reminder that even with cultural differences, the anxieties and uncertainties of adolescence are something we all share.
Right. And it's also in Kenya that Ali encounters the Muslim Brotherhood, a powerful and influential Islamic movement. She describes a growing fascination with their teachings and her involvement in their activities.
This seems like a pivotal moment. She's moving from confusion and rebellion towards a more fervent embrace of religion.
Exactly. And it demonstrates the seductive power of ideology, especially for young people searching for meaning in a chaotic world. Ali's embrace of the Muslim Brotherhood highlights how even intelligent and independent minds can be drawn to extremism when presented with seemingly clear answers to complex questions.
It's like she's found a sense of belonging and purpose within this movement.
Yes, but it's a complex and ultimately fleeting sense of belonging. Remember, this is just the beginning of Ali's journey. She's still got a long way to go and many more challenges to face.
Yeah, I'm sure there are some surprising turns ahead.
Oh, absolutely. We've only just scratched the surface of Ali's story. Stay tuned, because next we'll delve into her return to Somalia, her daring escape to Europe, and the events that shape her into the outspoken activist she is today.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Infidel. When we left off, Ali was in Kenya, drawn to the Muslim Brotherhood's ideology, but also grappling with the realities of Somali and Islamic culture, especially for women. This next chapter is where her life takes a truly dramatic turn.
Last time you mentioned her return to Somalia. What happens there? Ali goes back to a country ravaged by poverty and political instability. It's supposed to be a homecoming. But it's marked by disillusionment as much as familiarity. She sees the beauty and resilience of her people, but also the devastating effects of poverty, corruption, and clan warfare firsthand.
How does she process all of that?
It deepens her understanding of Somalia's challenges and fuels her desire to find solutions. At the same time, she's staying with her father's second wife, Mariam, and observing the strained relationships within the family. It adds a personal layer to the larger societal struggles she's witnessing.
And what about her involvement with the Muslim Brotherhood? Does that continue in Somalia?
It does, but she also starts to see a darker side to the movement. She witnesses how their ideology can be used to justify violence and oppression, which later plays a crucial role in her eventual rejection of the group and her embrace of secular values.
So she started to question the very ideology that initially drew her in.
Exactly. And it's during this time that Ali makes a bold decision. She breaks off her engagement with Abshir, the young man who introduced her to the Muslim Brotherhood.
That's a huge step, especially within a culture that places so much value on arranged marriages.
It is. It shows her growing discomfort with those cultural constraints and
Yeah.
her willingness to defy societal expectations, even if it means going against her family's wishes.
Is this the point where she starts to plan her escape?
Not quite yet, but the seeds of that desire for freedom are definitely planted. And then her situation becomes even more complicated. She finds herself in another arranged marriage, this time to a man named Osman Musa, who lives in Canada.
Does she accept this marriage?
Not at all. Right from the start, she rejects him. She even criticizes Osman to her father, pointing out his lack of intellect and his bigotry. But her father dismisses her concerns, emphasizing Osman's lineage, his good job, and his adherence to tradition.
It sounds like her father is prioritizing those cultural values over her personal happiness.
You're absolutely right, and it underscores how deeply ingrained those values are in Somali culture. Individual preferences, particularly for women, often take a backseat to family ties and social standing.
So what does all do?
She hatches a daring plan to escape to the Netherlands. It's a risky move, fueled by a desperate desire for freedom and a growing sense of disillusionment with her life in Kenya. She's basically leaving behind everything she knows, facing the unknown with a mix of fear and excitement.
It's a real turning point in her story. She's transitioning from a life defined by tradition and obligation to one where she can finally pursue her own path.
Precisely. And when she arrives in the Netherlands, Her initial impressions are striking. She contrasts the order and cleanliness of Dutch society with the chaos of Nairobi. Even public displays of affection and women in revealing clothing take her aback.
It highlights the vast cultural differences between her upbringing and the liberal society she finds herself in. It must have been a huge culture shock.
Absolutely. She's both fascinated and intimidated by the freedoms she encounters, freedoms that were completely unimaginable within the confines of her upbringing. But she also experiences unexpected kindness. She talks about a Dutch policeman who helps her find a refugee center, a simple act of compassion. That reinforces the stark contrast between the often corrupt authority, as she's known, and the rule of law that governs Dutch society.
It seems like she's starting to see the possibility of a different kind of life, one where rules matter, and individuals are treated with dignity and respect.
Yes. And that realization deepens as she settles into life in the refugee center. She describes her struggles to learn Dutch, but also her evolving views on Islam. She makes the significant decision to remove her headscarf.
That's a powerful symbol of her growing separation from the traditions that have defined her life so far.
It's a statement of self-determination, a rejection of outward symbols, and an embrace of a more personal approach to spirituality. And as she integrates into Dutch society, she starts to distance herself from the Somali community, particularly those who blame their problems on racism rather than adapting to Dutch culture.
It's like she's recognizing the limitations of clinging to tradition and embracing the values of her adopted country.
Exactly. And that clash between Ali's evolving worldview and the traditional beliefs of her family comes to a head in her difficult relationship with her sister, Hawea. They have very different views on motherhood, religion, and integration.
It's a reminder that even within families, cultural assimilation can be fraught with conflict.
Absolutely. And Ali's experiences working as an interpreter further expose her to the challenges faced by Muslim women in the Netherlands. She encounters cases of domestic violence, forced marriages, and honor killings.
These are the very things she was trying to escape.
Exactly, and it fuels her growing activism. She sees firsthand how cultural and religious beliefs are often used to justify the oppression and abuse of women, and it strengthens her resolve to challenge these harmful practices.
So she's moving from personal experience to a broader understanding of the issues at play.
Yes, and that understanding deepens during her studies at Leiden University. She pursues a degree in political science, becoming fascinated by political philosophy, particularly the ideas of Enlightenment thinkers who championed reason and individual liberty.
It's like she's finding an intellectual framework for the values she's already embracing in her own life.
Precisely. And this intellectual awakening further solidifies her break from the dogma of her upbringing. It fuels her desire to contribute to a more just and equitable society.
It seems like she's finding her voice, both personally and intellectually.
You're exactly right, and her personal life reflects that growing sense of self. She meets Marco, her Dutch boyfriend, and their relationship represents a complete break from the social and cultural norms of her past. They eventually move in together, symbolizing her embrace of a lifestyle that would have been considered taboo within the confines of her upbringing.
A powerful statement of her independence and her commitment to living a life defined by her own choices rather than the dictates of tradition.
It is, and Ali goes even further in her embrace of her new life. She begins to identify as Dutch, a decision that further alienates her from the Somali community, but reflects her genuine sense of belonging in her adopted country.
This highlights the complexities of cultural identity and the individual's right to choose where they feel they belong.
Absolutely. But amidst this personal and intellectual growth, tragedy strikes. Ali's sister, Hawea, dies in Kenya.
That must have been a devastating loss.
It was, and it's a turning point in Ali's story. She reflects on her sister's life, recognizing the missed opportunities and the constraints that limited Hawea's choices. It fuels her determination to speak out against injustice, particularly the oppression of women within Somali and Islamic culture.
She's driven by a desire to make a difference, to create a world where women are free to live their lives on their own terms.
Exactly. And that desire leads her to take a major step. She decides to enter politics.
Wow. That's a bold move.
It is. She responds to the publication of Paul Scheffer's article, The Multicultural Drama, which criticizes the integration of Muslim immigrants in the Netherlands. Ali agrees with Scheffer's assessment and joins the Labour Party. hoping to bring about change from within the system.
So she's going from personal activism to engaging in the political arena.
Yes, and she quickly becomes a controversial figure. She's praised by some for her courage in speaking out against the problems within Muslim communities, but she's also accused of Islamophobia and betraying her own culture.
It highlights the sensitivity of these issues and the difficulty of having honest conversations about cultural and religious beliefs.
Absolutely, and that difficulty is compounded by a specific event. Ali criticizes Islam's stance on homosexuality during a televised interview with an imam.
I can imagine that didn't go over well.
It sparked outrage within the Muslim community and accusations of blasphemy. It really exposed the deep divisions within Dutch society regarding the limits of free speech and the challenges of reconciling traditional beliefs with the values of a secular democracy.
It's a reminder that freedom of speech, while essential, isn't always easy to exercise, especially when it comes to criticizing religion.
You're right. And then the world changes. The 9/11 attacks occur, and Ali is horrified by the violence.
How does she react to that?
It shakes her to her core. She recognizes the danger of Islamic extremism and realizes that her former associates in the Muslim Brotherhood could be capable of such acts. It's a moment of profound disillusionment, a realization of the seductive power of ideology, and the potential for even seemingly peaceful movements to be twisted into instruments of violence.
It's a wake-up call, a moment of reckoning with the true nature of the ideology she once embraced.
Yes, and it leads her to a pivotal decision. She starts to question her own faith, gradually moving towards atheism. She even has a final, poignant conversation with Upshir, confessing her doubts about Islam.
That's a huge step, a complete rejection of the faith that once defined her.
It is, and it comes at a price. She faces increasing criticism and threats from within the Muslim community. They label her an apostate, a traitor. Her life is put in danger.
It's a reminder that speaking truth to power, especially within your own community, can have serious consequences.
Absolutely. But despite the risks, Ali refuses to be silenced. She continues to speak out against the problems she sees within Islam, particularly the oppression of women.
It's an act of incredible courage. She's risking her own safety to stand up for what she believes in.
You're right. And that courage leads her to collaborate with filmmaker Theo van Gogh on a film about the oppression of Muslim women.
That's a significant move. What was the film about?
The film, titled Submission, is a powerful indictment of the misogyny and violence that are often justified in the name of Islam. It challenges the prevailing narrative of Islam as a peaceful and tolerant religion, forcing viewers to confront the darker realities of certain interpretations.
I imagine that sparked quite a reaction.
It did. It outraged many within the Muslim community, further inflaming tensions and putting both Ali and Van Gogh's lives in danger.
So the stakes are getting even higher.
Yes, they are. And tragically, those heightened stakes lead to a horrific event.
What happens?
Theo van Gogh is brutally murdered by an Islamic extremist.
Oh my God. That's terrible.
It's a devastating loss for Ali, and a stark reminder of the very real dangers she faces for speaking out against extremism.
How does she cope with this tragedy?
She's forced into hiding for fear of her own life, whisked away to the United States, and placed under the protection of the Witness Protection Program. It's a complete upheaval of her life, a jarring contrast to the freedom she'd found in the Netherlands.
This is a pivotal moment in her story. She's facing the true cost of her activism, the very real possibility of violence and even death.
It is, and the question becomes, how does she move forward from here? Does she retreat into silence and safety? Or does she find a way to continue her fight?
That's a powerful question to leave us on. I'm eager to hear what happens next.
We'll delve into the aftermath of this tragedy and explore the final chapter of Ali's journey in our next segment. Stay tuned to see how she navigates the challenges of continuing her activism while living under constant threat.
So she chooses to go back to the place where all of this trauma happened.
She does, and she doesn't just go back to a quiet life. Ali accepts a seat in the Dutch parliament. It's a defiant act. She's refusing to be intimidated by extremists and remains committed to fighting for the rights of women, especially Muslim women.
That takes incredible courage. But I imagine her time in Parliament wasn't easy.
It wasn't. Ali continued pushing for stricter integration policies and criticized the government's approach to multiculturalism. She also never stopped speaking out against the oppression of women within Islam, which kept her at the center of controversy.
It sounds like she was walking a tightrope, trying to advocate for change while facing criticism from all sides.
Exactly. She was accused of both Islamophobia and of not doing enough to challenge the status quo. It's a difficult position. But Ali refused to compromise her beliefs. She understood that real change requires challenging deeply ingrained cultural and religious norms, even if it means making enemies.
One example of that is her art exhibition, right? The one highlighting the abuse justified by certain Islamic teachings.
Yes, it used powerful imagery and personal testimonies to expose the realities of honor killings, forced marriages, and female genital mutilation. It was a controversial exhibit, but it started an important conversation about the role of religion in perpetuating violence against women.
It seems like Ali was always looking for ways to amplify her message,
Yeah.
to make people confront these uncomfortable truths.
She was. And despite the constant threats, she never backed down.
You mentioned earlier that she was placed under police protection.
hmm
Was there ever a specific incident where her life was in danger?
There were many. The threats were ongoing. But one incident that stands out is when a radical Muslim group published a hit list with her name on it, alongside other critics of Islam. It made the danger very real and very personal.
That must have been terrifying.
It was, but even in the face of that fear, Ali refused to be silent. She continued to write, to speak, and to challenge the ideologies that she believed were harmful.
It's a remarkable level of commitment to her beliefs, even when her own safety was constantly at risk.
It really is. And then, something shocking happens. The Dutch government, under pressure from right-wing politicians, launches an investigation into Ali's citizenship.
What were they investigating?
They claimed that she lied on her asylum application years earlier, and incredibly, they ended up revoking her Dutch citizenship.
So they stripped her of her citizenship after all she had done for the country.
They did. It was widely condemned as a politically motivated attack, a way to silence a dissenting voice. It was a stark reminder that even in liberal democracies, those in power can be threatened by those who speak truth to power.
What happened to Ali after that?
She was devastated, of course, but she refused to be defeated. She fought the decision and eventually won back her citizenship, but the experience left its mark. It showed her the fragility of the very freedoms she was fighting for.
It's like her own story became a microcosm of the larger struggle against extremism and the forces that try to silence dissent.
You're exactly right. And despite the setback, Ali remained committed to her activism. She continued to write and speak out against injustice and oppression, eventually moving to the United States, where she continues her work today.
But looking back on her entire journey, what are some of the key insights you took away from Infidel?
For me, it's a powerful testament to the human spirit's ability to overcome unimaginable hardship. Ali faced more challenges than most could fathom, but she never let fear dictate her actions. Her unwavering commitment to her beliefs, her courage in speaking truth to power, and her resilience in the face of adversity make her story incredibly inspiring.
It's a story that really forces you to think about your own beliefs, your own values, and what you would be willing to stand up for, even in the face of danger.
Absolutely. It asks difficult questions about faith, identity, and the clash between tradition and modernity. And it reminds us that the fight for freedom and equality is never truly over. It takes constant vigilance and the courage to speak out, even when it's hard.
Thank you for guiding us through this deep dive into Infidel. It's a book that will stay with me for a long time.
My pleasure. It was a privilege to explore Ali's extraordinary journey with you, and I hope it inspires our listeners to reflect on their own lives and the role they want to play in shaping a more just and equitable world.